Are you looking for an easy accessory that adds warmth and flair? This hooded infinity scarf might just be your new favorite project. Hi, I'm Christina and I love to digitally pattern draft, creating some unique pieces of wearable art. And in today's video, we're going to be making a hooded infinity scarf, a simple yet stylish addition to any cold weather outfit. It's perfect for beginners or anyone looking for a quick and cozy sewing project. So let's get started creating this comfy, versatile scarf together. If you're interested in the pattern, you can definitely find it down below. And let's gather our materials and move over to the projector. I'm going to be using patternprojector.com to project this pattern out. It is a super handy website that if you have not tried yet, I highly recommend you give it a go. So once I have my pattern up here and I'm fairly happy with the placement, I'm going to go ahead and lay out my fabric. As I was laying out my fabric, I saw that I could not really see the lines very well, so I changed it over to the dark setting. It automatically flips it for me, super quick, super easy. I love how easy it is when you're using patternprojector.com. Cannot recommend it more. So I'm going to finish laying out my fabric, making sure it's nice and smooth, that the pattern matches from the top layer to the bottom layer so that I have a nice pattern going from top to bottom. Then I'm going to go ahead and start cutting out my pattern. For this hooded infinity scarf, it is a fairly simple pattern with a large rectangle for the base of it and then two pieces for the hood. So the large rectangle, I want to cut two of each of my fabrics, and then for the hood, I want to cut one of each. Now it's one of those that I kind of wanted to play around and put the hood on the bias. I thought that would be really kind of a fun twist. So I am kind of changing up the grain line to get a different look. So I put it on the bias there. And then I'm able to kind of move my hood around and put the back of my hood also on the bias. There we go. Now I have the outer or fashion fabric all cut out, and it is time to grab the other fabric, lay it out, and cut it out. Specifically for the hood sides and back, I want to make sure I keep those on the grain so that it won't cause the other fabric to stretch out as I wear it for longer and longer periods of time. So having one fabric on the grain will help keep the other fabric from stretching that is on the bias. There we go. We are now officially all cut out. It's time to move over to my sewing machine and start putting this together. I'm going to start by creating my hood. I'm going to start by lining up the bottom edge of the hood on either side and the center top point of each of the hoods. And then I'm going to work my way around and pin everything in place because it is kind of working from on grain to the bias to cross grain. I am wanting to pin fairly frequently and kind of make sure that one fabric is kind of easing into the other so that it creates that nice smooth line. So right up here at the very cap of all that curving, I am going to be throwing in a couple of extra pins while easing in the sides of the hooded pattern. This will ensure it has a nice smooth look. Once I am done with the inside lining part, I'm going to do the exact same for the fashion fabric on the outside. I'm going to line up the bottoms of the hoods on either side, pinning them in place, and then I'm going to pin the center top as well. And then I'm going to ease the fabric around, pinning lots and lots right there so that I have a nice smooth transition and an even slight ease through the cap of the hood. Now that both my hoods are pinned, I'm also going to just prep the long scarf by matching up the edges of the back of the scarf and pinning them together so that they won't move on me. There's the lining. I'm going to do the same for the outer. Now you want to make sure that the pattern is matched. If you have a pattern here, this is where you're going to want to be very essential of how you are matching that pattern. Then once you're good, we're going to go ahead and give that a pin down. And then it's time to move over to the sewing machine and sew them all together. So I'm going to start with the hooded of the lining, and I'm just going to sew my 5/8 inch all the way around, going nice and slow around that curve, making sure I'm not catching any of the extra fabric that can get caught underneath that foot. So make sure that everything is going through just the 2 layers all the way around the hood. There we go. There is my lining hood. I'm going to pull all my pins. And then I'm going to move on to the fashion fabric of my hood. And again, working around that cap, make sure that you don't have any extra fabric caught beneath your foot, that you are only sewing the 2 layers and having it nicely eased around that corner. And there we have it, back stitch at the end. Pull out all my pins. Make sure I did catch a little bit of a little pucker right here. So I am going to go and just pull that and fix that. I always like to fix it right away. This time I'm going to have the side that was puckering on the upside instead of the downside. And I'm just going to re-sew over what I seam ripped out right there. There we go. Next, I'm going to move on to sewing the center back seams of both the inside lining fabric as well as the outside fashion fabric. So just a quick and easy straight stitch all the way down that center back seam. And we're going to repeat that on the fashion fabric side. Back stitch at the end, and then it's time to move over to the iron. We're going to start by pressing open the center back seams of both the fashion fabric and the lining fabric of the long scarf. There we have it. Then we're going to use a ham to then press open the seam of the actual hood. The ham will help get around that curved area, and I highly, highly recommend you getting a ham for any curved seams like this because it'll make your life so much easier. And there we have it. We now have the fashion fabric all pressed and happy. Now let's move on to the lining fabric. Up one side, then up the other side. Then we're going to work it around and press that curve. There we have it. Now it's time to actually attach the hood to the scarf. So I'm going to line up the center back with the center back of the pattern. I forgot to mark my notches, so don't forget to mark your notches. So I just had to fold in half and figure out where the exact center was. Then I'm just lining up the rest of the hood from the center out. And I'm going to do this both for my fashion fabric and for my lining fabric. So match up that center placement. Since I didn't notch it, I'm folding it in half to find where the center of the back of my hood is. Match it up with the center back seam. And pin them together. Once they're pinned together, we're going to move over to the sewing machine and stitch them both down. So we're going to work from one side, back stitching at the beginning, and just do that 5/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way across to fully attach the hood part of the scarf to the scarf part of the scarf. There we have the fashion fabric done. Clip those threads. Now we're going to do the lining fabric. There we go. Clip those threads. And we're going to go back over to the ironing board and give it a press open. You always want to make sure that you press your garment as you go. That will make your garment look more professional. It'll make all the different seams really lay flat and not look puffy or bulgy at the end. So I always recommend press as you go. I know that sometimes means you have to get up and you have to go do stuff, but it will make all your garments look so much better. Once they're pressed, it's time to actually attach them and put them together. So I'm going to lay them out on this large table here. And with right sides together, I'm going to start pinning all the way around. So I'm going to start at the center, line up those center seams so that I know that they match. Then I'm just going to work my way out and pin the scarf. Once I have the bottom part of the scarf pinned, I'm going to move to the top part of the scarf to pin. Going to line up where the hoods meet each other at this scarf, then pin to the outside. Then I'm going to pin up and around the hood of the scarf. Now it's time to move back to the sewing machine and sew these two together. So I'm going to sew along the bottom edge at the 5/8 inch seam all the way across. There's my center seam. And we're just going to keep going. There we go, back stitch at the end. Now I'm going to skip the two short edges because I'm just going to, that's where we're going to flip it right side back out. So I'm going to go ahead and pull all my pins here. And now it's time to do the top part of my scarf. So I'm going to start at one end and sew the long edge of the scarf all the way into this corner. Now here's where you have to be a little bit specific with how you're folding that fabric. I'm going to backstitch at the beginning of this corner and at the end of this corner to help strengthen that corner. Then I'm going to go up and around the top of the hood. Working slowly, making sure everything is nice and smooth. I'm not catching extra fabric and I'm not getting any puckers. Then I'm down to the other end, and again, I'm going to do another corner. I'm going to backstitch at each side of the corner to help strengthen it. And then I'm going to sew out the other side of the scarf. There we have it. Clip those threads, pull those pins. And now we're going to move back over to the ironing board to press open these seams. So I'm going to start with that bottom seam because it is going to be a little bit easier. I'm going to use a sleeve board to help make sure I'm getting a nice crisp line and not ironing extra parts of the fabric. So I'm just going to press them open and slowly feed this fabric onto the sleeve board as I do that. There we go. Now that the one side is done, I'm going to pull it back off the sleeve board, flip it to the other side, and do the exact same thing on that other side. It's going to be a little bit more tricky once we get to this corner here. What you're going to need to do is you're going to want to clip into this corner so that you can get it to lay nice and flat. So we're just going to clip in. We want to clip to and not through those threads. We're going to twist it, so we're going to be going up over the hood. Just takes a little bit of kind of maneuvering stuff around. We're going to maneuver our way around this hood till we get to that other corner that we're going to need to clip. We're going to clip into it, clip to and not through. That'll help relax that fabric so you can get a nice good press right to that corner. And then kind of flip it around so that you can do the last press of the top part of the scarf. And there we have it. You are now going to flip it right side out through the two ends that you have not yet sewn up. And then we're going to give it another press all the way around so that we have nice crisp edges and it doesn't want to roll or anything on us. Now it is time to actually finish up the scarf and make it into a full infinity scarf. So we are going to line up the seam allowances between the fashion fabric and the lining fabric. Want to make sure that you give those a really good pin. Then you're going to want to pin all the way across the scarf on the fashion fabric side. And you want to then line up the other seam allowance of the fashion fabric to the lining. Then what you want to do is you want to give yourself an extra pin that is matching up the lining area by an extra 2 or 3 inches, depending on how wide your scarf is. This is going to help you have a nice clean outside and not having to hand sew nearly as much. So then I'm going to go back to the original side, go another 2 to 3 inches from that seam allowance. And then we're going to sew that. So I'm going to go to my sewing machine and actually sew this seam closed. So I'm starting on the lining, going over the seam that attaches the lining to the fashion fabric, going down the fashion fabric area, back to the other seam that's connecting the fashion fabric to the lining, and then onto the lining for a couple of inches. This just helps make it so that you don't have to hand sew for nearly as much. We're going to clip those threads, pull out all my pins. Then we're going to kind of pull it flat and take a look, make sure everything looks good, make sure that the seams are lining up nicely up at the top there, or at the two edges, and then you guessed it, we're going to move back over to the ironing board and we're going to give it an iron. So we want to give it a nice good iron to really crisp up that edge where we move from the fashion fabric to the lining fabric. We might want to make sure that we give it a really good press on both sides. Now that it's pressed really well, I'm going to go ahead and do a top stitch around both sides. So I want to go around the bottom edge that is just the straight and flat area. And then I want to go around the top edge that is also including the hood. When I get to the hood, I want to make a nice crisp corner and turn. And you want to make sure that you are staying the equal distance away from the edge to keep it looking professional. I always like to use the edge of my foot to give myself a guideline. And then finally, it is time to hand sew up the last little bit that we did not sew up with the sewing machine. So I'm just going to use a slip stitch and I'm going to sew up this opening. And there we have it. Look at how cute this infinity scarf is. I am super, super excited to give it a try on. And here we have it, a comfy, cozy infinity scarf with a fun hood. You can either wear it up or wear it down and just have a beautiful little scarf going on. Remember, if you want to make this pattern for yourself, you can find the pattern down in the link below. And I would love to see, if you actually end up making it, I would love to see what fabrics you chose, since you can see the inside and the outside just want to meld together. I would love to see your projects. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you like and subscribe so you can see other fun Christmas projects, as well as other fun sewing projects, as well as some digital pattern drafting. I look forward to seeing you in some of my other videos. Happy sewing!